Introduction. If you are in any way feeling stuck or powerless in your life, there is a solution. You can choose to live in the now or the present moment. By understanding this skill and applying it to your life, you start slowing down the treadmill of stress and pressure in your life. You're still running. You're still taking care of business. You're still being a responsible, mature adult. That's not going to go away. The big difference is you become more aware, so you are able to become more content and fulfilled in the present moment. You're no longer kicking the can down the road when it comes to your personal happiness and fulfillment. You learn how to live in the present moment and enjoy it and accept it for what it is. Let me tell you, life is never going to be perfect. And if you're going to set yourself up where you will only agree to be happy when perfection enters your life, you're setting yourself up for a big letdown. This training teaches you the valuable skill of living in the moment. Not tomorrow, not next week, and definitely not next year. Right here, right now. I'm sure you already know this, but the moment you close this training, you might get hit by a truck. You might suffer some sort of weird and nasty medical allergic reaction. You might eat some bad food. There are all sorts of things that may cut your journey through this life short. Life is short. It is fragile. This training teaches you to enjoy every moment. Hang on to it. Get a lot of meaning out of it. This is how you are able to keep running on that treadmill with a deep and abiding sense of peace and harmony within you. Sounds awesome? Great. Let's jump in. Reclaim your power of focus. Your focus is probably the most important factor in the process of overcoming whatever challenges you face. A lot of people think that they have to have the right IQ, or they have to be born with certain advantages, or some sort of other excuse. They think that there's all these circumstances and factors outside of them that would explain their success or lack of it. And unfortunately, the more you focus on things outside of you, and I'm talking about your circumstances as well as the situations you find yourself in, or the people you surround yourself with, the more you lose sight of your focus. In fact, it can get so bad that you might ignore the power of your focus altogether. You might even completely forget how important personal focus is. Let's get one thing clear. What you choose to focus on grows. If you don't believe me, look at people who hit the gym all day, every day. These are people who may be obese. These are people who may look like they're made out of overinflated dough. But the more they focus on working out, sticking to a certain diet and lifestyle, the sooner all that fat melts off. Similarly, people who focus on making money, sooner or later, end up achieving their dreams. People who focus on attracting members of the opposite sex tend to, later on, connect the dots and meet with success more often than failure. In other words, you get out what you put in. What you focus on attracts your attention, which of course attracts your energy. When you devote energy to any kind of activity, sooner or later, you get good at it. Sure, in the beginning, it may look like it's impossible. It may look like it's just not going to happen. But the more you keep at it, the more you're able to figure things out. And sooner or later, these baby steps turn into giant leaps forward. What you choose to focus on grows. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter how seemingly impossible it may be. As long as you give it the proper focus, eventually it will give way. I can't stress this enough. Unfortunately, people think that success is something that just falls into their lap. They think it's something that requires inhuman sacrifice and effort. No, it's not. Instead, it's just a choice of where you train your focus. The good news. Given how important focus is, I have some great news for you. Focus is a choice. That's right. It's not something that you're forced to do. It's not something that you are tricked into or somehow coerced by your circumstances. It's something that you can choose. If you can choose it, then this means you have control over it. There are so many other things you can choose to do, but you can choose to focus. This is power. This is control. This gives you some measure of input on how your life is going to turn out. Real focus is never desperate. A lot of people are under the impression that things will only change in their lives if they find themselves with their back against the wall. They think that once the chips are down and everything is desperate, that's when everything falls into place. What they're really doing is looking for excuse after excuse to avoid lifting a finger to change their circumstances. That's all you're doing if you believe that you have to be pushed to make a decision. Real focus is never desperate. It is never the product of desperate times. It's something that you willfully choose, and it's something that you choose consistently and continuously over an extended period of time. Don't think that it's some sort of magical superpower that you discover at the last minute. You will always have the power to choose, and you will always have the choice of focusing. It is never desperate, no matter how bleak the situation may look. Reclaim your ability to focus. If you can wrap your mind around the idea that you can choose to focus, you can start reclaiming the power you get when you focus on certain things. Believe it or not, you can focus on your time to the extent that you can control the output you get when you spend your time on anything. I know this sounds crazy because most Americans think that there are not enough hours in a day. There are a lot of people who wish that there was more than 24 hours in a day. That's how pressed for time they are. What they're really suffering from, however, is a lack of focus. Believe it or not, you don't have to burn 8 hours at work to squeeze out 1 hour of productivity. Believe it or not, there are people out there who can put in 8 hours of work and get 8 hours of production. I know it sounds crazy, but that is the power of focus. Similarly, you don't have to waste a tremendous amount of your attention on many things in your life for you to maximize the results you get. You can focus intently on certain activities and have them produce a lot more results. You don't have to sit around worrying about certain things that may or may not happen. By making a decision, giving it the proper attention it deserves, and focusing the right amount of resources and attention to detail, you end up getting the results you want without worrying yourself to death or mentally burning out. Finally, you can choose to focus your resources to such an extent that you get a lot more bang out of every buck you spend. One of the main reasons why Americans are trillions of dollars in credit card debt is because of inefficient spending. The problem isn't spending. The big challenge is that they spend on many things trying to get some sort of outcome. They didn't know that if they spent on the right things, they would have spent less money and gotten into less debt while getting a lot more results. You have to reclaim your ability to focus on all these to start living a life of power, purpose, meaning, and direction. Unfortunately, people who end up struggling by moving a lot while staying in the same place suffer from a total lack of focus or fuzzy focus. The bottom line with focus is pretty straightforward. You only have a finite amount of mental resources in any given second. Make it count. Learn the skills that you need to get the most out of the time that you put into any kind of activity, the attention that you put into any kind of project, or the resources you devote to your plans. If you're able to do this, you start to reclaim your life. Rediscover the eternal now. I know what you're thinking. You're probably rolling your eyes and saying to yourself, yeah, it's very easy. Just focus. I understand your skepticism. There is kind of a hollow ring to the phrase, just focus. It's not all that far from just do it, the famous Nike slogan. But when you dig deeper, it's actually all you need to know regarding how to achieve greater control over your life. Focus means directing your attention, because where your attention goes, your time, resources, and personal energy flows. And it all boils down to something that you have a tremendous amount of control over, your attention. This is why it's really important to rediscover the concept of the eternal now. Believe it or not, you are always living in the present moment. When a second passes, the next second is the present moment. Once that's up, the next second is the present moment. Now, a lot of people think this is pointless. After all, that's how time is supposed to work. But they miss the big picture. They miss the fact that when you are in the moment, there are a lot of things that are actually possible within that frame of time. We're not just talking about time and space. We're talking about mental, spiritual, and physical states. If you don't believe in the present moment and you think it's just a means to an end, it's easy to blow through your time. Seriously, it's easy to live through time in a way that you're not really paying attention to the things you should be focusing on. Sadly, most people have forgotten the present moment. They're all in a rush to be somewhere. They're all in a rush to become somebody else. They start looking at themselves primarily as transitory beings. In other words, who you are right here, right now, is something that you're not really all that happy with. Instead, you want to be somebody who is 50 pounds lighter, 10 years younger, $10 million richer, and so on and so forth. Your focus is burned up by the overarching need to go somewhere and become somebody else. The concept of the present moment completely escapes you except for certain schedules or dates or appointments. But other than that, it's just some sort of temporal stepping stone to who you are supposed to be. This is why so many people seem so busy, preoccupied, and obsessed with motion. They can't wait to get from point A to point B. The problem is, desiring motion and that alternative identity of who we could be exacts a heavy price. They leave us empty. The eternal now, which is one of the greatest gifts anybody can give us, is worthless to us. We look at it as basically a byproduct of living and not really a goal in and of itself. This is really too bad. How come? The eternal now is the foundation of your future. It is the birthplace of who you can be and what you can become. In other words, it is the foundation of possibility and being. Meditation reveals the power of the eternal now. When you practice meditation and mindfulness, you tap into the power of the eternal now. First of all, you become aware that you are living in a present moment. Once you are able to do that, you then slowly but surely come face to face with the power of your mind to shape your reality. Instead of constantly trying to zip from one mental place to another, you realize that there's power where you are. You realize that you have all that it takes to get out from under whatever it is that's frustrating you. It doesn't matter how stuck you may feel. If you are able to tap into the power of the eternal now, you can use the present moment to achieve important changes in your life. Best of all, you're able to do this right here, right now. You break away from the old and familiar game of kicking the can of your happiness down the road. You can choose to be happy, fulfilled, and content right here, right now. All it takes is to train the way your mind is already configured to rediscover and celebrate the eternal now. Remember that the big picture is the eternal. Before I jump into the blueprint you can follow to tap the power of your mind for greater personal productivity, results, success, and happiness, I need to establish one key principle. It's easy to look at mindfulness and meditation as simply tools that you use on your journey to get what you want. Fair enough, but it's very important to understand what it is you want in the first place. Let's put it this way. Even if you were equipped with the most powerful equipment in the world, if you don't know where you're going, your trip would be pointless. Chances are, you would be chasing your tail and be going around in circles. The world existed before you, it exists now while you're in it, and will continue to exist long after you're gone. You have to be at peace with this eternal truth. To fully wrap your minds around this, I need you to understand certain truths about how human beings have historically looked at the world and their place in it. With this understanding, your mind should be big enough to see your real place. Everything works in duality. Did you know that everything in the world, both seen and unseen, works in duality? You can't have black without white. You can't have empty without full. You can't have up without down. You can't have in without out. This is not an empty and shallow mental exercise. Instead, these dualities speak to the fundamental truth of what gives life meaning and power. The Greeks got it partially right. Their philosophy is binary in nature. Male and female, good and evil, light and dark, and so on and so forth. The problem is the Greeks focused primarily on the good things, the ideals, the forms, the essence. When they did this, they basically sidelined the other half of the equation. It is a binary world. They got that part right. But by focusing only on the positives on the matter at the expense of the antimatter, of light at the expense of darkness, they stripped away a significant portion of the power of duality. In fact, the Western mind has historically viewed the other side of these equations as suspect or weak or somehow untrustworthy. It's easy to celebrate the masculine side of a personality, but we're suspicious about the feminine side. It's easy to see the value of the light, but we're scared of the darkness. Do you see how this works? This is the Greek or Western mindset. Yin and yang make the universe turn. Thankfully, there is an alternative to the Greek black and white mindset. I am, of course, talking about the Chinese idea of yin and yang. When you look at the yin and yang symbol, it's obvious that it acknowledges the binary nature of reality. But unlike Westerners, the Chinese see an equal value in the other side of the equation. They understand that full or substance would be meaningless without the complementary reality of emptiness or nothingness. One good example of this is in the Tao Te Ching, the primary scripture of Taoism, where it highlights the importance of the empty hole in a pot. Usually, people don't even think about the empty hole in the pot. They think about how big the pot is. They think about the price. They think about what the pot is made of. Usually, people don't think about the empty hole. But the Tao Te Ching points out that it's the emptiness inside that pot that gives that pot value. After all, that's where you store stuff. A solid pot with no hole in the middle is completely worthless. In other words, it's the void or the nothingness that exists in a binary relationship with somethingness that gives life value. The Chinese get it. They understand that the darkness is not to be feared. They understand that emptiness is not something to cry over. It all depends on context and how the seemingly negative elements work with other factors. This is how you get a big picture of the eternal. You go past duality and understand and ultimately embrace the power of the void. A lot of Americans are scared of death. They're scared of the good times ending. A lot of people don't like to watch movies end, but believe it or not, death is what gives life meaning. Let me put it this way. If you knew you were going to live forever, do you think you would live a life of meaning? Do you think you would be kind to people? Do you think you would look to heal the wounds of your past? Do you think you would try to be compassionate and understanding? Of course not. When you get a deadline, you get perspective. The idea of duality communicates this loud and clear. You can't just live your life looking at the something of life. These are things that you can see, touch, taste, smell, and hear. You should also pay attention to the void. This is something that you can only grasp with your mind, but it's real nonetheless. It complements the something to produce real power in your life. The key that turns the ignition on this process, however, is focus. Your mental self-reclamation blueprint. This training is set up to use the power of mindfulness and mental focus to help people reclaim their lives. It doesn't matter whether you are feeling stuck, feeling frustrated, or you just feel that your life is meaningless. When you follow this blueprint, you start living your life with a renewed sense of purpose. How come? You gain perspective. It turns out that if you're like most people, you spend your life in such a way when you're pouring a tremendous amount of your focus and energy on things that actually keep you stuck. You can't devote them to things and activities that can actually take you where you want to go. You have to reclaim yourself because nobody else is going to do it for you. It doesn't matter how much they say they love you. It doesn't matter how much they say they know you or accept you. At the end of the day, everybody's got enough problems of their own. You have to do this yourself. You have to take the initiative. Nobody else will do it for you. Please pay attention to the blueprint below. This blueprint proceeds on a step-by-step basis. You have to master and fully carry out the previous step for the next step to make sense and produce results. I will talk about the following self-reclamation steps. Step number 1, take stock. Step number 2, get real. Step number 3, get quiet. Step number 4, refocus. Step number 5, scale. One final word. What I'm going to teach you in this training is not magic. It's not mysticism, nor does it involve religion. The techniques that you will learn here work with how your mind is already configured. You're not doing something new to your brain. You're just tapping abilities that it already has. It really all boils down to shifting your focus and your energy. Everything else will flow because your mind already has these abilities. Zero in on your life's objective. To truly reclaim your life by focusing on living in the moment, you have to have a destination. Remember, the ability to live in the present moment is just a tool. It's just a practice that you use to achieve some sort of objective. Don't confuse the two. A lot of people think that if you practice mindfulness, meditation, or engage in any sort of activity that helps you fully utilize the moment, then you are living life to the fullest. That's not true. You still have to have objectives, goals, and a destination. With that said, knowing the power of living in the moment makes the process so much more meaningful. Instead of just simply chasing your tail and ending up this mental fog, every moment feels like an adventure. It feels that you're doing something with your life. It feels that you were put on this earth for a reason. That's a very empowering feeling. It is like the 180-degree opposite of feeling stuck, feeling like another face in the crowd, or feeling like your life really has no meaning. The moment that you start thinking that your life has no meaning or purpose, it becomes very easy to imagine life without you. In other words, it's easy to think that you are an accident, or whether you live or die doesn't really matter because you're really not making that much of an impact. You see the rabbit hole that you fall into once you start that line of thinking. The mental self-reclamation blueprint that you're following starts with the most important part. It answers the question why. The problem with life is that a lot of people are focused on answering what, when, and how. Don't get me wrong, these are important questions to ask, but they have to lead somewhere. They're preliminary questions. They're not the final question. The final question is why. This is all about understanding your understanding of the meaning of life. I know that's kind of a funky sentence, but that's the best we can do. At the end of the day, life is our understanding of what life is about. It's not like you can look into the purest form of reality of life. Again, this is not mysticism. This is not a religion. Instead, this is practical psychology. What we're looking at is your perception or your read of the ultimate objective of your life. Now, this might seem like a tall order at this point, and I would agree with you. It's like trying to unravel a thick ball of yarn in one step. It usually doesn't work that way. You have to slowly unwind that ball, and this is where the following process comes in. Take a mental inventory. At any given second, what are you thinking about? What are you worried about? What do you obsess over? What do you focus on? Write all this down and record the first thing that comes to your mind. There are no right or wrong answers. What's important is you just write down everything that comes to your mind. Get it in writing. Do you see a pattern? Do you focus primarily on process instead of objectives, or vice versa? Do you focus on timelines instead of the things you're supposed to do? Again, there's no right or wrong answer. I just want you to be aware of the things and concerns that you carry around in your mind every single moment. When you do a mental inventory, it's as if you brush the fur of your dog. Throughout the day, your dog will pick up certain debris from your yard, from your carpet, from any interior space of your home. But when you brush the fur of your dog, or your cat for that matter, it ends up with a fresh coat. It ends up clean. The same applies to your mind. If you don't do a mental inventory, you'd be surprised as to how cluttered, clogged, and overburdened your mind gets. It's as if you're living your life day to day and you're picking up all these worries, concerns, and anxieties, and you are the last person to know. Take a focus inventory. Your mental inventory is kind of a broad survey of what you stuff into your mind. The next step is to drill a little deeper. We're going to be a little bit more particular. In this step, we're going to look at what you devote your focus on. In any given second, where does your focus mostly go? Are you focused on things that happened in the past, or are you worrying about things that have yet to happen? Are you focused on the tasks immediately ahead of you? Do you spend a lot of time thinking about whether you've forgotten something or not? Do you feel anxious about forgetting something or not doing something that you're supposed to be doing? Again, there's no right or wrong answer here. There's no one-size-fits-all solution. Just write down what you spend your focus on. It's important to note that different people focus on different things. People, after all, have different priorities. We have different values. We come from different backgrounds. We also have different experiences. Take a life inventory. For some people, this is going to get a little bit uncomfortable. For this stage, I want you to write down what you think you've achieved with your life. It doesn't matter whether you're 20 years old, 40 years old, or 80 years old. It doesn't matter whether you have a degree, you dropped out of high school, you have a couple of $1 million to your name. Just write down what you think that you have achieved in your life. It doesn't have to presently exist. Maybe it's an experience that you had. Maybe one of your greatest personal achievements was you visited Rome, Italy, or Paris, France. Write that down. Whatever you think you have achieved, list it. Again, this should be a stream of consciousness exercise, so don't edit yourself. Don't think that an answer is stupid or doesn't have a place on your list. Just write down whatever comes to mind. If it feels like it answers the question, list it down. What truly matters? Now, at this point, you're going to do some sorting. You understand that your life has an objective. That is, after all, the first step of this process. With your objective firmly in mind, look at your mental inventory list, your focus inventory sheet, and your life inventory tally. Go through all those listings with your life's objective in mind. Always refer back to your ultimate objective as you go through these materials. Get comfortable with the objective as your primary frame of reference. Use that razor. Now, here comes the tough part. Look at all your different lists and then start scratching out items that do not lead to your grand objective. Your plan is simple. Either it leads you to the objective or you lose it. In other words, on all the lists that you have set up, cut out things that are obviously not going to lead you to your objective. This is your goal, because if you were to do this, you practice personal clarity where everything in your life leads to one place and one place alone. I remember the first time I did this. It was really quite eye-opening. If anything, it made me realize that a lot of the things I was working for, a lot of things I spent a tremendous amount of emotional, financial, and physical resources on were pointless. It's like being assigned a big project at work and you spend most of your time checking your Facebook updates, your Instagram feed, and your emails. Don't get me wrong. At some level or other, those tasks are important. But ultimately, you're not going to keep your job depending on how well you answer your email. You're not going to get a raise because you are very prompt in checking up on your Facebook notifications. Do you understand where I'm coming from? Focus on what's important. Focus on what you are here for. In other words, zero in on your life's objective and make sure your mental inventory, your focus inventory, and your life inventory line up to grand objective. If you were to do this, you'd start living a life of meaning, direction, and purpose.